let's we kind of got away from our like launch talk, which was nuts, by the way. Let's talk about our freaking 24-hour madness that was our launch.
We need to talk about our basically 12 to 12. I got 3 hours of sleep. You got maybe 5 hours of sleep.
Maybe.
AJ.
Dude, yeah, I was so determined to get those episodes just like as best as possible. I was up till 9 a.m., folks.
So I showed up Tuesday at like 10 or 12. And the night before, we had stayed up all night writing a to-do list on a whiteboard, and it probably had 50 to-dos on it. And each of those to-dos probably had like 3 or 4 sub to-dos underneath it. So every one thing was like multiple things. And we just started like delegate, like we were like, okay, this comes out on the 16th.
I don't know if people understand fully what we're talking about. We were launching the podcast fully, meaning we had to upload everything. We had to get all the promos ready. We had to make sure the website was ready to go. We had to make sure that everything was live on every single platform. We literally had a whole whiteboard of just items to check off. Like we just had we had a lot of work to do.
The whiteboard was basically full.
Pretty much.
I mean, it was we had, let's see, like I want to say 10 to 15 outlets and channels and direction we had to release at the same time within an hour, and everything had to be primed and prepped and ready.
We literally had
that.
The Wheels to Walking main channel, the Full Podcast YouTube channel, the Clips Podcast YouTube channel, our website, Patreon, Wheels to Walking Libsyn, which is the audio platform, Wheels to Walking Instagram, Wheels to Walking Facebook, Wheels to Walking TikTok, the Andrew Deitch Podcast Libsyn, the Andrew Deitch Podcast website, the Andrew Deitch Podcast Instagram, the Andrew Deitch Podcast Facebook, my personal Instagram, my personal Facebook, my Andrew Deitch Podcast email list, our Facebook group that we just created, by the way, which you can join, and then also just peer-to-peer texting, like texting everyone, telling them about the new podcast.
And I'm still doing that right now.
It was absolute madness.
And keep in mind, it was only 3 of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and in addition to editing all the clips and the actual physical medium that you're listening to, or not physical, the actual media that you're listening to right now, especially if you're like on YouTube and all that, like there's just a lot of behind the scenes shit that was going on.
Yeah, and we definitely laid out this huge plan, and I was like, okay, I'll be over here tomorrow. And then I came over and we worked until about 12 or 1, and I was like,
I think it was more like 3 or 4, I thought.
well, let me finish. I'm not finished.
Okay.
And then at that point, I was like, I don't feel comfortable going home until this is done. And because I could go home and sleep and wake up and be back here at 9 or 8, and then have a couple of more hours. I was like, but we're on such a roll here. Like we're on momentum here. I was like, let me run back to my house, get my meds, like get some food. Let's get caffeined up and let's just rock this all night.
AJ and I were kind of like, yeah, we're not going to sleep. Like we were both almost kind of under that assumption already. Like we were kind of like, yeah, when you suggested the overnight, the all-nighter, we were kind of like, yeah, we were kind of already thinking that, to be honest. Like we got a lot of shit to finish.
Well, I knew that, but
it was good.
But I wasn't about to leave you guys. Like,
no.
I felt like
we appreciate
I took that role, and I was like, if anything, I can be an organized accountability monster right now. I was like, like, Andrew, what are you doing? AJ, what are you doing? Okay, are you finished? What can we do next? All right, this is what I need in order to put this stuff over here. What do you need to move over here? Like, I kind of played this like little managerial role where I was like managing the whiteboard and all the tasks and what everyone was up to, and like running and getting food and energy drinks and like just putting, like, because I didn't have a lot of laborious work to do.
Yeah.
I had a lot of organizational work to do and a lot of like timing and launching and scheduling, but all the labor landed on you guys. And I wasn't about to leave and be like, all right, see you guys in the morning later. Like I've done launches before for big companies, and like that's just not how it works. Like you pretty much have to have a team of people that stick around and are in close quarters. That's why I wanted to come over. I'm like, we need to be close so that we can just like walk across the hall and be like, hey, I need this.
Yeah, it is cool. I mean, I think like those nights are kind of some of those nights where it's like, we're not going to forget those, because those are the nights where it's like, we're putting in all this work. No one's asking for this shit, but like, it's going to change a lot of things. I mean, I'm so proud of like what we've already created, and what we're going to create. Like it's just freaking awesome. Like I'm so stoked about like how it all went down. Like it was just really cool. And I'm just so stoked that it's finally out into the world and people are able to listen, and that we've got our new studio space all set up. Like we've been talking about transitioning from the Andrew Deitch podcast to this podcast for like so long. I mean, I think we started talking about it back in,
It was like back in
July, September.
July to August.
Yeah, something like that. Maybe it was like August where we were like, yeah, let's do this. Because AJ and I lived together. We moved into our house towards the end of like May, I think it was. Maybe it was in the beginning of May, actually. And yeah, that was just it was a weird time because like I just moved. I had my podcast studio in Richard's condo, if anyone doesn't know that already. And then basically I reached a point where I was like, dude, this Wheels to Walking podcast is picking up a lot of steam, and I think it's time that we like transition. And I remember that conversation we had in the bathroom, dude. Yeah, that was like a big deal.
I remember you've been saying for a long time, like, yo, man, like we need to do the Wheels to Walking podcast. Let's get it public. And I was game from the beginning, but I needed you to figure out that in order to do that, you kind of had to retire the Andrew Deitch podcast.
Yeah, a little bit.
And
which was already happening, by the way, because we were doing the Wheels to Walking podcast every single week. And the Andrew Deitch podcast was supposed to be a weekly show, but it was just always like falling behind because I didn't have a guest, or like, we were just swamped with Wheels to Walking stuff or whatever. And so it was like we were consistent as fuck with the Wheels to Walking podcast, but the AD podcast was just like falling by the wayside, sort of.
Mm-hmm. And it was one of these things that like from the beginning, like this was always about like the AD podcast. Like I wanted you to have the AD podcast. Like I wanted you did not lose your thing, and I wanted
my baby.
This is your baby, and I wanted you to, if you did change your mind, to make it on your own realization. Like I was gonna not put any pressure or mention it, but I kept noticing that you would always put more time and attention and effort into Wheels to Walking stuff instead of into your other stuff. But then
if you think about it, I mean, like with Wheels to Walking, there's just a bigger audience and a bigger like need for it, I guess. Like there was already if I didn't post an AD podcast, people would care, but not as many people that would miss a Wheels to Walking episode, or even you. Like there was like money behind it, there's production behind it. We were filming all the time, like it was just a different beast.
Yeah, I remember. It was when we had that talk in the bathroom. I don't know why we were in the bathroom, honestly.
I think it was because I was like leaving. We had just ended like the Wheels to Walking podcast, and then we were just like
washing my
hands or whatever, and then like we were crossing streams, and then I like locked eyes with Richard, and I was like, dude, I think we need to quit the AD podcast, and then we made out. It was hot. We didn't kiss, but we did cross streams and we did lock eyes. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but I remember at that point I was like, I remember I asked him, I was like, is that what you want to do? And he's like, yeah. I was like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I have this AD podcast over here that I keep putting logs on the fire, but the fire's not lit. It's like smoldering a little bit, and like maybe it could catch fire, but it's not lit. He's like, I want to put the logs on the fire of Wheels to Walking because I know that fire's burning. He's like, and I know by adding more logs, it's going to make it burn hotter versus if I put more logs on my fire, I might suffocate it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a big proponent of like the Tarzan method. Casey Neistat talks about it, but he didn't invent it. But it's basically this idea that Tarzan's trying to get across the jungle. There's a million vines that he could reach, but each vine represents like an opportunity in your life, right? And you're trying to get to the other side, which is whatever success is, And people think there's like a straight line to success. Oh, you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and you do this, and it should be all calculated, and you should have a plan. But the truth is, like in life, you have opportunities that are presented. Maybe there's 3, and you can only choose 1, And you've got to take that vine, and you're gonna swing. That vine is going to lead you to more vines, and you're going to have to swing with that vine. And maybe one of those vines might accidentally bring you a little bit backwards, but then that next vine might even bring you way further than the other vine would have.
But you have to let go and reach forward every
time.
Exactly,
but there's never a straight path across the jungle. It's always going to be zigzagging, and that's exactly what was happening with the AD podcast. It was like, okay, I've reached a point with this where I feel like we've got the production on lock, we've got the video on lock, I've got AJ on board with the team. Like there's there's all these structures in place. The only thing missing is, again, like it was just kind of like lacking that hardcore fan base that Wheels to Walking already had. And I knew that if I kept going with the Andrew Deitch podcast, I could reach that because I was getting better and better guests. I was getting better as an interviewer. More people were DMing me about how much they were loving the podcast. It wasn't like it was going badly. I was still getting listeners, but it was just like, it didn't feel like the growth that was just so explosive with Wheels to Walking. And it just felt like, here's my freaking vine, dude. Like, I need to swing on this next vine. And we kind of made that hardcore decision. Like, yeah, we're gonna make this transition.
Yeah, and I think
Took longer than we thought.
As we've been doing all these steps, it's becoming more and more and more real with every single time. But I think it got the most real for me and the most real for you kind of at the same time. And that was around like, so we launched everything like around between 12 and 2 on Wednesday. And around 10 o'clock, I hadn't even had time to think about like, oh no, what are people going to think of this? You know, like, are they going to like me? Are they going to listen? Like,
yeah, and I'd already forgotten about how badass all the graphics and branding and everything was, because I've been staring at it for the past like 3 months, like just making it all. Because I don't know if everyone knows this, but I designed the whole website. I've designed the, all the graphics for the show and everything. I didn't do the photography for the graphics, but that was Simon Needham. He's a beast.
We love Simon. Hey, Simon, if you're listening, what's up?
What up, Simon? But I was so stoked on all that stuff right when I made it, but I've just been staring at it, and like we've been just doing like minor little iterations and roadblocks and random little things that I like got. It just became like the normal, and so I forgot about the fact when people see it, like, whoa, this is crazy, this is cool, like that's kind of what I'm on the same page. Like I took a second to be like, holy shit, people are actually going to be like seeing and listening to this for the first time.
Yeah, and then I kind of started to get a little anxious and nervous, which if you guys know me, I just don't. Like, I don't get nervous or anxious about anything. I just do things and just like flop it out there and let it happen. But I was like, oh, I haven't even had time to think about like what people will think. And I'm like, I don't care what people think. But anyhow, it was like at that moment that it got really real for the both of us, especially when we started hitting the upload and like the done and the complete and the save buttons, and like every time something went live, it was like, oh, there it is.
Things were kind of live for like 24 hours where like they were up, but we hadn't promoted it in anywhere where anyone would know.
Yeah.
So like as soon as we like started talking about it was like, whoa, this is real now.
The promo engine machine, and then it got to at one point, this was probably one of my favorite parts of the whole time. AJ was up till like 9 or 10 a.m. and
so he was passed out.
He passed out from the day before. He was done, and
he didn't need to post anything.
He
had done his share.
You would fall
I've
asleep.
already done all my posting.
Yeah, you would fallen asleep around 5, and then got back about 9. I got to sleep at like 6:30 or 7.
Didn't you wake me up in my room?
Yeah, I came out. Yeah,
I literally passed out in my room. And my office is connected to my room, so AJ and Richard were still kind of working.
Not kind of working. We definitely were still working. Yeah.
I fell asleep, and then I, of course, fell asleep with the lights on. Classic Andrew. And then Richard literally already had gone to his house, fallen asleep, and then came back to my house and like woke me up. And like, yo, dude, what up? And I'm like, what?
Like time to do stuff. But yeah, so I got like a couple hours of sleep. You got a little bit more because like when you fell asleep, there was more stuff to do, but like you were dead.
I was dead to the world. I like couldn't make myself do anything more.
You were dead, and I knew it. So I got all done that I could get done. He got all done that he could get done, and I was like, oh, time for me to go and come back. And then mainly, like, you hadn't done any out of that list that we mentioned on the whiteboard. You really hadn't done any of the like 80 podcast stuff. So when you started doing that, you would like we always do, we bounce captions and ideas and topics and ideas for promo off of each other. And at one time you were like reading me back one caption you were about to post, and you started just crying. You started just like,
I was like about to post it, and I was like,
you're like, like you just started like
I was
fucking
crying.
like
you
bawling.
Want to read it? Should I read it?
Yeah, maybe you start crying again. But it was,
I don't know.
it was really a special moment because I knew that they were like happy tears, but it was still like sad tears at the same time, because it was like you were like grieving the death of your baby while simultaneously getting 2 babies at the same time. It was like, goodbye AD podcast, hello Wheels to Walking. This, but like it was just this moment where and we just like hugged for like a good like 10-15 seconds.
Yeah, you're like, just, let it out, bro.
Let it out, bro, because it was like
it was very happy. It was happy tears.
It was special. Yeah.
Here, I'll read the post. I said, yesterday I announced that I was ending my podcast, but my journey as a podcast host is far from over. 2 years ago, I met Richard Corbett for the first time to record episode 47 of the AD podcast. We sat down and he told his powerful story of spinal cord injury, addiction, suicide, and recovery publicly for the first time. This was the exact reason why I started my podcast, to give people a platform where they could share their stories and talk about deep subjects. After listening to his episode over and over, Richard realized that he had something to say and decided he wanted to create something even bigger. I started working as his producer full-time, and he let me build my podcast studio in his condo. We were an amazing team, and our business relationship and friendship grew stronger and stronger. Over the past year, Richard and I have been traveling around the country shooting videos on the Wheels to Walking YouTube channel. 7 million views later, we realized that we had a lot more to talk about than just wheelchair stuff, but I knew that I couldn't just keep having him as a guest on the AD podcast. Today, we're launching our brand new weekly show where we talk about current events, what it's like being full-time YouTubers, and dissect our unique friendship/business relationship. If you've been a fan of the ADP, I know you'll really enjoy the Wheels to Walking podcast. This is a huge step for me to totally change up my platform, but I know this is the right move. First 6 episodes are live now. Everywhere you listen to podcasts, please go give us a review on Apple Podcasts.
Where did you start weeping?
I think it was a good question.
Well, at one point you said, "I'm actually starting to cry while reading this," and I thought you were like typing that out, but you were like dead ass.
I was saying that, and then when I said it, it was like the floodgates opened because I was like acknowledging the tears because. Like, even right now, I'm like, I could, like, if I wanted to cry, I probably could, like, if I got in my feels about what I read, but I was, like, just objectively reading the words.
You're like, I am a robot.
But when I was typing the caption, I had to, like, think those emotions and think those feelings to get the words to come out. So I was, like, kind of already in my feels, like, typing it, and then I was already, like, sleep deprived and, like,
Dude,
still kind of, like, weirdly caffeinated from the night before. It was just like a combination of just like all these things where like, why are you crying? I don't know. Like
anyone who's ever pulled an all-nighter and then
delirious.
And then you're like, you're so stemmed up on caffeine, you're sleep deprived, you're food deprived, you feel like a sleep hangover.
Yeah.
Dude, I have a, it's like, because I've had this before, it's like your brain and like your insides are just like all like dead. But your hands are like, you know, shaking, and you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna die.
It's like if you like spent the whole night like setting something up. I mean, it's literally the only thing you can liken it to is like launching something or staying all night up to do something crazy.
It reminds me of a couple of things. Thing number one, church lock-ins. You guys remember lock-ins?
Bro, and we would cry too.
Dude, lock-ins.
Dude, I remember crying at church at lock-ins.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know what a lock-in is, basically it's like a youth group thing where you all go hang out at the church and they literally lock you inside of the church. So one room will be like...
It's not as sinister as it sounds.
Yeah, one room will be like where the video games are, and one is where the pizza and the Mountain Dew is, and one is like where the board games are, and one is like where the bouncy house is, and it's like basically you just run amok. You just run amok in the church. And there's always
how accurate that is.
And everyone would like between like 4, 5, and 6, like start to fall asleep, but there was always those like a couple of dickheads, and I was always one of them who would be like, "Come on, guys, let's call the all-nighter. We gotta stay up all night. Mountain Dew, sugar, pizza, yeah." You know, like everyone would be trying to like sleep on.
I just imagine you saying those actual words: Mountain Dew, pizza, sugar, yeah.
No,
and
like,
your friends are just like,
I remember one time people were so mad at me. There was this whole bouncy house area that people had turned into beds so they could like sleep on.
Yeah.
And my obnoxious ass gets on it and starts jumping around.
My God.
And like jumping and doing flips, and everyone's like, "Yo, we're trying to chill." And I was like, "This is the bouncy house for bouncing."
It's called a bouncy house for a reason. If you didn't want to get bounced, you shouldn't have slept here.
Yeah, so I remember that, and I also remember like when I worked at Apple, I was on the Apple Visuals team, and if you guys don't know much about Apple, they convert the entire store overnight whenever a new product is launched. So
I'm not familiar with that company. Can you elaborate?
No, I'm not gonna elaborate at all. Thank you. So the store closes at 10, and by like 7 or 8 or 9 the next morning, you pretty much have to be completely done, and you do the entire store. We're talking everything gets completely redone.
I mean, if you think about it, whenever they do a product launch, you walk into Apple and you're like, "Oh, they already got the new shirts, and they already got all the displays are different, and everything." Whoa, the whole store is different.
The only thing that stays the same is the floor and the tables. That's it. Everything else.
But there's different products on the tables.
No, I mean just like the physical wood tables.
Yeah, the physical wood tables don't move.
So like the signage and the products and the software and the signs and the merchandise and the accessories and the clothing and the name, like the whole place gets a whole fresh wipe. And there's usually a team of like, 30, 40, 50 people, depending on how big the store is, and you just stay up all night, and it's just debauchery, like loud music, and people are in headphones, and, there's always problems, and, like one thing doesn't work and something doesn't work, and then some people get put on teams like, you're responsible for putting all the new apps on the new phones, and you're responsible for flashing all the new hard drives for the display computers, and you're responsible for putting up the new signs on the walls. And the front of store displays were always the hardest, the ones that go in front of the windows near the doors.
They're like hanging.
Well, they're massive. They're like the size of cars, and you have to like build them and design them. And some of them are like I remember one time when the iPhone Color came out, we had to hang up
The 4C or the 5C.
5C. It was an entire window of just like balls hanging from a string, but those balls hanging from a string designed something.
Yeah, I remember that actually.
So we had to build that from the ground up with like using these like foam balls and like string. And
it was basically the way that they were hanging like formed a shape. And they just like sent you all the balls and strings and were like, make this.
Well, I mean, you also get like really
template.
detailed template designs, and like it was wild. But I remember, we would always, the part of the visuals team would stay to what we called clap in the customers. So all the people that like waited in line or camped out overnight were the first to buy the stuff in the store, and they would all.
That's the weirdest retail experience.
They would all run in, and we'd all be like, "Yeah, way to go! You just decided to wait in line for an iPhone.
So
Good
white.
job. Yeah." But like, I remember being like hallucinating, being like, my brain thinks it's morning time because my circadian rhythm just started. I'm sleep deprived and overly caffeinated, and I'm seeing shapes on the walls. Like I'm tripping out hard, and then you would just go home and pass out for a whole day. And if you were unlucky enough, you'd get scheduled for like a 4:00 shift. And it's like, no, I get the whole next day off. Leave me alone.
Yeah, that's cool. Hope you enjoyed that clip. If you want to watch the full episode that clip was from, you can click right here. If you want to subscribe to the channel, you can click right here. And if you want to watch more clips, we got 2 more right here.